For those of you who are already here, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and we will be getting started in a minute. Think the people coming in have slowed down to a trickle, so we can get started. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Shreya Koirala. I'm the Public Health Program Coordinator for Hepatitis B Foundation. Welcome to today's Be Informed session. It's a very special session where we're going to be discussing clinical trials. And without any further ado, we'll get started now. Before we get ahead with this session, a couple of housekeeping items. All of the attendees attending today's session are going to be on mute. Please do feel free to introduce yourself. We have a chat button. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see that. There is also a Q&A button right next to it. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please drop your question in the Q&A box or in the chat. And once the presentations are over, we'll get to your question and we'll make sure your question is answered. Just a note, today's session is being recorded. We will also have slide presentations and we'll share both of those with you in the next few weeks. A little bit about Hep B United. Hep B United is our national coalition dedicated to reducing the health disparities associated with hepatitis B by increasing awareness, screening, vaccination, and linkage to care for high-risk communities across the United States. We have more than 60 partners across the country. If you want to know more about Hep B United, please feel free to reach out to me and I'll be very happy to sit down with you and chat more about it. Today's Be Informed session is also a capacity building program through Hep B United. It's a virtual education series which is geared towards anyone interested in learning more about hepatitis B, including patients, family members, community advocates, healthcare providers, public health professionals, and community members. Be Informed sessions are every other month on the third Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And we focus on a specific hepatitis B topic every session, which is related to improving awareness, testing, vaccination, linkage to care. And we have our awesome speakers who come and talk about various topics with you all. Today we have Dr. Yasmin Ibrahim, who is our in-house expert. She's the Senior Public Health Director for the foundations, and she is going to be talking about clinical trials and answering any question you might have about it. We can get started now. Over to you, Yasmin, and I'll stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Shreya. And hello, everyone. As Shreya said, this is Yasmin Ibrahim. And give me a second to get the technology on my side working. Can you see my presentation mode screen? No? Okay, perfect. Oh, sorry. I didn't hear anyone, so I wasn't sure.
Sorry, I was on mute. Go ahead.
No,
Yeah.
that's okay. All right. So today I'll be talking a little bit about clinical trials and like what are these and what are clinical trials and why they matter and what is the important for to participate in clinical trials. And then I'll also be sharing some of the challenges for clinical trials and how this is particularly important for the people living with hepatitis B and Delta. I'll be sharing a little bit of some of the work that we've done, but I will not go really into any of the data or the results. And what I'm really most excited about is sharing some of the resources that the community and individuals can use on our website. to learn more about clinical trials and how to find a clinical trial. So without any further ado, um, uh, a clinical trial is really an experiment that may be investigating a new medication or a new combination of two medications that are known to work well individually for two other conditions, or maybe even the same condition but used to be used separately. And a clinical trial is futuristic, which means it's a planned investigation or study to be conducted prospectively or in the future with predefined objectives. That means the targets or the end in mind is already written and approved, so that it is not really much changed as that study goes on. And also that helps reduce the bias and enhance the replicability or the reproducibility, so that if other researchers in other countries would to repeat that same study, should have similar results. One of the hallmarks or some of the hallmarks of a clinical trial is having a control group and blinding. And these are features to make sure that there is no really bias or minimize the chance of error in clinical trials. So a control group means that there is a comparison group, folks who are not really taking the medication or taking the standard of care if there is already a medication for this condition. So, for example, if this is a new treatment for hepatitis B, then LIDI might be the standard of care, and in this case, the control group would be folks who are taking antiviral, whether entecavir or Venledi, depending on the trial design, versus the new treatment. And one other hallmark feature of clinical trials is blinding, which means neither the participants, sometimes it's just blinding. That means participants do not know if they are taking the placebo, which is no medication at all, or the standard of care, or they are taking the new medication, so that they are not really biased or feel that they are improving when they are really not. And sometimes it's called double blinding, which means that neither the participant nor the investigator or the physician managing the trial know actually what is that participant is on, whether the new treatment or the standard of care or the placebo. It's highly regulated, so ethical review boards or IRBs and regulatory bodies ensure that participants' safety rules and are followed, and at the same time they are informed about the risks of the trial, the benefits, and they understand very well that their participation is voluntary, and then that they can actually withdraw any time without even giving a reason or a explanation why they want to withdraw. One very important distinction to understand is that there are several forms of research, and it's important to understand that not every research is a clinical trial. So a clinical trial would have these elements that are just explained, but there is always public health research. There is research that is the real, what is called real world evidence, which is when a drug is already approved, for example, and already being used by the public, then real world data are collected on its effectiveness or side effects. Or so these are not really clinical trials. Part of it might be part of the clinical trial, as I will explain in the next slide, but it is not a clinical trial. So very quickly, these are the clinical trials have 4 phases, and when people hear the term clinical trial, they usually think immediately that participants of that trial are at risk, or being guinea pigs, or being the test people, and most don't know that before a medicine is actually put in on phase 1 of the clinical trial, or being tried on humans, it has to go through a lot of phases. The first phase, or the before even phase 1, there's the preclinical or lab phase, and this is where the drug is tested on living cells in the lab, and then tested further on animals that are biologically similar to human to assess effectiveness and safety, and avoid and exclude toxicity. After preclinical studies prove promise in terms of effectiveness and safety, then companies can move on, or drug sponsors can move on to the mostly known phases of clinical trials, which is phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. In phase 1, it's mostly to test the new drug or treatment in a small group of people, mostly healthy individuals, to determine safe dosage range and identify potential side effects. Phase 2, the drug or treatment is given to a larger group of people to see if it is effective. Usually, the participants would be patients. And phase 3, the drug or the treatment is given to a larger, that's what I just mentioned. And then it's also, phase 3 is also continuously used to assess safety. So safety is assessed throughout all the phases, not just after preclinical and phase 1 it stopped. It's still safety data are being collected, and then usually after phase 3 there is a lot of discussion and back and forth and communication between the regulatory bodies, and in every country. Here in the United States is the FDA, or in Europe, it's the European Medicine Agency or Authority, and it's different in every country. But usually, if it proves efficacy and effectiveness in after phase 3, then the drug gets approved. Phase 4 is studies that are done after the drug or the treatment being approved and marketed, to gather more information about safety and effectiveness. And again, this is also controlled, but it's important to know that even data about effectiveness, about side effects, are continuously being gathered and reported after the drug has been approved and marketed. Why clinical trials matter? In a nutshell, clinical trials are important because they are the safest way to develop and discover new treatments that effectively work to cure diseases or improve the health and quality of life of the patients. Because clinical trials have very strict safety regulations, they also tell us if a treatment is safe for people to use. It's important to understand that they also provide evidence-based and rigorous evidence that this drug is effective and safe. And they also establish causality. This basically means that without clinical trials, medical decisions would rely heavily on tradition or uncontrolled observation, which is definitely, we all know, prone to bias and error. Trials allow researchers with strong evidence to understand whether this medication or device or intervention is safe, effective, and superior. This is usually a very important word, superior, especially if there is already treatment. So the example I gave earlier about a new treatment for hepatitis B versus the standard of care of antivirals, these new treatments have to show that they are superior. They provide something better than what the current treatment provides. And then also, as I mentioned, clinical trials is the gateway for regulatory approval. Finally, clinical trials drive innovation and progress, and they allow researchers to challenge existing norms and models, explore novel mechanisms of disease for disease treatment, and refine treatment. One of the very important elements also of clinical trials are endpoints, which means that before a clinical trial is started, the researchers already have an end in mind. What should happen for this clinical trial to prove that a medication is actually effective or a new treatment is effective and safe? What should happen? Is it, for example, HBV DNA totally undetectable, or loss of surface antigen, or quantitative surface antigen lower than certain level? So in this case, these are the endpoints. And endpoints could be either clinical endpoints, which could be in the form of reversal of cirrhosis, for example, in the case of liver disease, or in many clinical trials that tackle cancer or are targeting cancer is survival rate, how many years a person lives without progression of the disease or developing metastasis. There is something also called surrogate or proxy endpoints, which are indirect measures believed to predict the clinical benefit. So in hepatitis B case, HBV DNA is an endpoint. It has to be to a certain level or undetectable, but there are other endpoints that could be secondary or called in this case surrogate, like quantitative surface antigen or other biomedical measures. These endpoints can make the clinical trial more efficient, more acceptable by participants. There were times that certain illnesses or clinical trials for certain treatments required something that is, for example, not accessible to everyone, like a liver biopsy before and during and after the trial, or after a certain amount of weeks. And this is very invasive, and many participants would refrain from that or not agree to do that. So, as I mentioned, these other endpoints can help make the clinical trial more acceptable and more efficient and less costly. One of the very important endpoints are patient-reported outcomes, or PROs, and these are as exactly the title denotes, these are outcomes that the patient describe or people living with the disease describe as important to them. It could be mobility, it could be lack of pain, or the pain has gone, or it could be lack of fatigue, like improving the continuous fatigue. So many times and oftentimes we hear from people living with hepatitis B a lot of symptomatology that defies a lot of the narrative that hepatitis B is a silent disease. It is not a silent disease. A lot of research has been done on this, and it shows that there is physical symptomatology, mental toll for living with hepatitis B or Delta. And there is a social burden, and including many of these patient-reported outcomes that indicate the improvement in the quality of life is important. Now, hepatitis B space is a little bit behind than other disease areas. In other disease areas, patient-reported outcomes, or PROs, have made it really to be one of the important endpoints in clinical trials. We are working on this, but we're not really there yet in terms of really well-defined PROs, well-measured and validated. We're working hard on this, but it's still a long way. So these clearly defined primary and secondary endpoints before the trial begins are essential to avoid selective reporting and to avoid any bias or error in reporting the results. Oh, and one more thing, sorry. I mentioned that here about the endpoints. These endpoints, because they are predefined, they also have to be approved by the regulatory bodies and where the clinical trial is being conducted. So here in the United States, FDA has predefined endpoints like HPV DNA levels and surface antigen to and liver enzymes to if these endpoints are met in a clinical trial, then that means this medication is more prone if other factors are also covered to be approved, but it has to meet those predefined endpoints and endpoints that are approved by the regulatory body. There are a lot of stakeholders in the clinical trial space, and it's very, very important, the alignment and coordination and communication and partnership between all the stakeholders. But really at the heart of this is a complex space is the participant and people living with the disease, because they have the central role in all of this. They are willingly contributing their time. They accept the risk. They share personal data. They make the effort and put the effort to participate in these clinical trials to ensure that these medications are effective and safe for themselves and for others to benefit from these results. So that's a huge undertaking, and not only participation, but in ideal world, and this happens in many disease areas, and finally starting to happen in the hepatitis B spaces. A lot of people living with the disease now, when they have the right tool and the right platform, they do provide the input into the clinical trial design, the language used to communicate clinical trial with other prospective participants, and so on. Other stakeholders, and I will share a little bit more about that in a few minutes. And then there are the investigators and study teams who are responsible for conducting the clinical trial according to the protocol or the plan and the regulatory requirements, and they manage the participant recruitment and everything related to the clinical aspect of the study. Sponsors who could be pharmaceutical companies, but sometimes also large research institutions like the NIH provide the funding and the overall oversight, and they are responsible for trial design, data analysis, and reporting results. And in between these two stakeholders, sometimes there are contract research organizations who are often engaged to manage operational aspects of the trial, especially if this is a large multi-center study or sometimes multi-country study. CROs sometimes also take on the responsibility for participant recruitment as well. And then finally, there is the regulatory oversight and ethical oversight by the regulatory bodies and the ethical review boards, or the IRBs. And as I mentioned earlier, the effective collaboration among all those stakeholders is very essential for trial success. And sometimes there is misalignment or miscommunication, and this is why a lot of trials may fail and end before their term. There are a lot of challenges in terms of recruitment, retention, and diversity. So when it comes to a clinical trial, recruitment and retention are really among the most significant challenges in clinical trials, and many trials fail to meet their recruitment or enrollment targets, leading to delays, increased costs, or even early termination of the trial. There are a lot of barriers to participation in clinical trials, and between the investigators, the CROs, and the sponsors, and even the regulatory bodies, between those stakeholders, a lot can be done to improve recruitment and retention. It's really, and this is something I will be talking about a little bit more, but there are a lot of barriers that face potential participants to participate in clinical trials, including lack of awareness, logistical burdens, sometimes mistrust, and eligibility criteria sometimes are very restrictive and exclude a large segment of the patient population who might be otherwise eligible to participate. And similar to recruitment, retention is also like a barrier, and mainly in this case is logistical, the logistical component of this, the time spent, the duration, the frequency of visits, and the effective communication between the research team and the trial participants, where a lot of trial participants, when we talk to them, or potential participants, ask for things that are actually very easy to implement, but at the same time, very rare to find implemented. Another very important factor is diversity and inclusion, and this is a critical issue because oftentimes participants in those clinical trials are those who either have access to large research institutions, or have access to care at all. So this does not really represent, for example, the population of people living with hepatitis B in the United States, whom we know are a majority. People living with chronic hepatitis B in the United States are majority minority population of immigrant origin, and they have their own challenges accessing care, and also mainly receive their care at the primary care level, federally qualified health clinics and community centers. So having these clinical trials really at the center of big cities with large research institutions, there is some rationale for that, because it requires a lot of infrastructure and staffing and a lot of logistical issues, but that is not an excuse at all to exclude the majority of people who either lack access to care or have received their care at federally qualified health clinics or community centers, because there are solutions to this, and these solutions should be implemented to make sure that everyone have equal access to these clinical trials. And I think a couple of months ago, Shreya, Fiona, and I presented about some of the work we've done in this area and some of the solutions. So I will not go get into this in the interest of time, but there is a lot of work that can be done in this area to improve the diversity and inclusion of participation in hepatitis B and clinical trials. I think that's it for this part. Yeah, many of the innovative solutions may include decentralized clinical trials, some virtual component for some of the visits, providing really the support that people may need to be able to participate in trials. A lot of people told us that they an app where they can find information and something like My Health, where people can reach out to the investigation team and say, hey, this is what I'm experiencing, and get some feedback right away. These tools that are already there can be implemented in clinical trial as well, but we're not there yet. So hopefully we're working on this. And this is exactly at the heart of the work the foundation does. There is many of these challenges through the studies we've conducted have been identified, and we've been trying to collaborate with drug sponsors and regulatory bodies to find solutions that could facilitate the participation in hepatitis B clinical trials. I will be sharing some resources where people and many of the audience here can find more information about some of the information I shared. But first, this was the very first task when I joined the Hepatitis B Foundation that I worked on. So it's very dear to my heart, the voice of the patient. It was an externally led patient-focused drug development meeting that is hosted by the Hepatitis B Foundation and it was the first ever in the hepatitis B space to listen to people living with the disease about challenges living with the disease, what are their hopes for future treatments, and what would be acceptable for them. It's hosted by a patient organization usually, but it is the report and the recording, they live on our website, but they also live on the website of the FDA, because it's some sort of a collaboration with the FDA that provides the platform for people living with the disease to share their insights about living with the disease and what their hopes of for new treatments. That was in 2020. And we've conducted a global online survey and talked with 24 individuals one-on-one living with the disease. And then another resource is the Drug Watch, and we have 3 drug watches. This QR code here will take you to the HPV Drug Watch, but there is also another one for Delta clinical trials, not clinical trials, drugs in the clinical trial and in the pipeline, and another one for liver cancer. So this is an updated one, always be updated every month with every single drug out there that is in the clinical trial. It does not take you to understand the eligibility or if someone is interested to participate, but it's a very informative summary of all the drugs that are currently in the trial in different phases that are trying to tackle the virus from different platforms or from different ways, and where are they in the trial, in the clinical trial phase, whether it's phase 2 or phase 3 or phase 2A and things like that. So it's a very important resource if you want to get in a nutshell what is going on in the hepatitis B or Delta or liver cancer space. How to find clinical trial? There are 2 ways on our website. As I mentioned, we collaborate a lot with the industry to promote clinical trials and make it easier for individuals to find clinical trials. So we do promote those on the patient and provider opportunity webpage. And so this QR code will take you there. And this, as a lot of the industry partners have told us, it's a very helpful tool, because a lot of people then know about these clinical trials through our website. We get a lot of traffic on the Hepatitis B Foundation website annually, and it's a great way to learn about current research. It does not only provide information about current opportunities to participate in clinical trials, but also other public health research opportunities, if not clinical trials. So this webpage is an opportunity to learn about some of the clinical trials, not all, some of the clinical trials happening, and some of the public health research happening that is recruiting for participants if anyone is interested to participate. Now, what I'm really excited about is this research clinical trial finder tool. We've always had a clinical trial finder tool on our website, which helps people find clinical trials for hepatitis B, Delta, or liver cancer. But we've recently changed our platform and partnered with Research Match. It's also a nonprofit organization, and they also pull the data from the clinicaltrial.gov in a very friendly way. Once you click that icon that says find a clinical trial, you will be asked to put the health condition you're interested in, where you are, and it will enlist all the clinical trials available. And then as you navigate into each of these clinical trials, you will find simplified version of eligibility criteria, who to contact if interested to participate, and so on. Additional helpful resources: if you wish to participate in a clinical trial, make sure to ask all the right questions. Make sure you know your rights. So these two web pages that I'm sharing here, one is to understand your rights and as a clinical trial participant. So it's very important to do your due diligence and understand your rights, and as well ask all the right questions you need from your care provider, from the clinical trial investigation and study team. It's their job to make sure participants have all the information they need to feel comfortable going through this journey. Also, please don't be shy out from asking about financial compensation, childcare, transportation. Unfortunately, a lot of people shy from asking these questions, and these are resources that are available. And for some regulatory reason that I'm not sure why, oftentimes we see that there is a disconnect between the sponsor of the clinical trial allocating the funds for this, but then the clinical trial sites not really offering this component to participants. So if this is something that is needed, feel free to ask for it. It's your right. As I mentioned, we do a lot of work in this area. We do a lot of public health research to understand the barriers and enablers to participate in hepatitis B and Delta clinical trials. The Hepatitis B Foundation in 2022 established the first global hepatitis B and hepatitis Delta Community Advisory Board, the CAB. It had 23 and has still 23 members from 17 countries, representing 6 out of the 7 World Health Organization regions, especially from countries with the largest hepatitis B and Delta disease burden. Since then, CAB members have been invited to share the main goal of establishing the CAB was to establish a strong body of people living with the disease who understand about drug development and clinical trials and are able to sit on the table with investigators and researchers and drug sponsors to really make sure that the voice of the patient is there. And included and incorporated. And since then, CAB members have been invited to share their insights and expertise with drug sponsors in the hepatitis B and Delta research space. In 24-25, we've alone, this is just the last year, we've hosted 6 listening sessions with people with lived experience in hepatitis B and Delta, with drug sponsors and researchers to ask questions, to understand about the modalities they are working on, like have members learn from researchers and drug sponsors about their work, but also drug researchers and drug sponsors learn from the CAB about what is really most important to people living with the disease. In terms of education, the Hepatitis B Drug Watch and our website has a lot of resources about understanding your rights and questions that you need to ask before making the decision. And we do partner with a lot of industry and researchers to make sure that the voice of the patient is at the heart of this research. As I just mentioned, we partnered with Research Match to make it easier for people to find clinical trials, and we do run a lot of conversations and talks with regulatory bodies and clinical trial sponsors to make sure that patient-reported outcomes and endpoints that are meaningful to the patients are included in the clinical trial, and that clinical trial designs are patient-centric. Very quickly, this is some of the public health research that Hepatitis B Foundation has been doing in the area of documenting the lived experiences and quality of life for living with hepatitis B and Delta and liver cancer, and working hard on to develop and test effective PROs or patient-reported outcomes. We're also evaluating the perspectives of people living with the disease and their preferences for current and future treatments, and assessing the attitudes and perceptions of people living with hepatitis B and Delta towards clinical trials and challenges to participate in clinical trials, and also assessing perspectives of people living with the disease towards functional cure, partial cure, and long-acting antivirals. I will stop here. I know Shreya has the link to Joe's story, so I'll stop sharing, Shreya, and maybe you will be sharing the story.
Yeah, thank you, Yasmin. This was very informational. I've heard a lot of clinical trials, at least for me, but there's so much more work that goes into implementation. And this has been very informational, and I'm sure it has been for our attendees as well. As Yasmin mentioned, I would like to share the story of Joe, who is our storyteller. He has been living with hepatitis B for a long time, then got co-infected with hepatitis Delta. He researched for a trial himself and participated in it. So it would be lovely for all of you to see his story and hear about his journey. Give me a second, I'll line up the video. Sorry, forgot to share the sound. 1 second. Here we go.
Way back in 1978, and then in around 1998, I learned I was co-infected with hepatitis Delta. That's what trial was about, was a cure for
Shreya, it stopped sharing the screen.
Sorry, give me 1 second.
Sure.
My name's Joe Balistreri, and I first learned I had hepatitis B way back in 1978. And then in around 1998, I learned I was co-infected with hepatitis Delta. And that's what my clinical trial was about, was a cure for hepatitis Delta. My doctors never mentioned clinical trials, even when I was told that hepatitis delta had no cure or treatment. I knew about clinical trials. They were in the news or in movies or wherever. When I realized that hepatitis delta had no cures or treatment, I decided to look on my own for clinical trials. I thought that it might take decades for treatments to come around, and I didn't want to wait 20 years. So I found the trial on my own. So I had lots of questions. The main trial doctor, he responded to me right away in an email, and then we talked on the phone, and he answered a lot of my questions. And when I did the search, in the clinical trial search, you can see the protocol. The protocol basically explains the trial and what the schedule is, what the patient's obligations are. It explains a lot, but I still needed to talk to the doctor one-on-one to understand everything. I was in 3 phases, and I had to be qualified for each of the 3 phases. So there was a period of sometimes months in between the phases. But when I was actively in the trial, there was a lot of travel back and forth. And over the course of 6 years in the 3 phases, I traveled to DC and Maryland over 70 times. While I was at the NIH in Maryland, I'd probably have to fast. I'd have to do up to 20 blood tests before breakfast. One thing that's tough when you're in a trial and you're away from home is that, like in my case, I pretty much went to DC by myself, and that's really tough. When you're doing research, don't be afraid to ask difficult questions of your doctors, or if you're actually talking to someone about a trial. Patients have a right to ask questions and have them answered. Remember that if you do agree to be involved in a clinical trial, patients always have the right to leave at any time if they find it, for whatever reason. Their life circumstances change, or they're just finding it too difficult. And of course, if you're on a trial drug, you really need to communicate whenever you're having issues. One piece of advice I always give out is if you have chronic hepatitis B, please get tested for hepatitis delta. That's very, very important to know. The Hepatitis B Foundation was really a wonderful source of support, and still is. I actually was able to talk to one of the doctors that's involved with the Hepatitis B Foundation, share with him my experience, my health condition, my lab tests, and get feedback from him. That was really helpful. It was like, while he couldn't prescribe anything, he could give me his observations, and so it was like getting a second opinion. I really valued that.
I'll be sharing a link to Joe's story with the resources I send your way. Now to the question and answer portion of the session. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to drop them in the chat. While we're waiting for that, I have a few questions for you, Yasmin.
Yes.
When a person is deciding whether or not to participate in a particular clinical trial, can you talk about briefly on what things they need to be looking at before they make that decision?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this goes back to the point of asking all the questions, read the patient-facing material very well. Make sure to even discuss it with your healthcare provider or with someone you trust, because there are so many ways. Like first, how many visits are needed? What is the time commitment needed for this? Ask about financial compensation, even though it is not allowed by regulation to actually pay participants for their participation. Participants can be compensated for their travel, for their meals, for their accommodation if they will need to spend a couple of nights in a different place. And even some clinical trial sponsors would allow to compensate for, let's say, child care or things like that. So these are important aspects to understand before making the decision. Also, make sure to think of all health related things, like understand the eligibility criteria and how that treatment may intercept with other health conditions that an individual might be living with, in addition to hepatitis B, for example, or hepatitis B and Delta. So there are a lot of things that are either health related or family related, life work related, or time and financial commitment related.
Awesome. And also, Yasmin, I don't know if there's information about this, but if there's somebody who wants to join a clinical trial and English is not their first language, they can request information about it in the language they speak, right?
That's a fantastic point. Yes, they can ask for an interpreter, and the research team should be able to provide an interpreter. Oftentimes, we ask research teams and clinical trial sponsors to provide the information already, make it handy and available in certain languages to be translated. But even if that doesn't happen, the participant has the right to ask for everything to be translated in the language that they are comfortable reading and understanding.
Wonderful. Also, like at least for me, we hear a lot of info about clinical trials, but correct me if I'm wrong, there's not a lot of very active participation when it comes to being a part of a clinical trial. What are some of the common myths that there are that kind of like prevents people from joining one?
Um, There are some sorts of mistrust sometimes, but I would really say that this is not the first thing we've heard from people living with hepatitis B. It is not really the mistrust. I would say, if anything, it's a concern, because many people either are on antiviral. Not many people, but some individuals are on antiviral, and like they have their liver enzymes under control, the HBV DNA is undetectable, and they feel like things are moving okay for now, and they don't want to rock the boat. This is particularly important if they have dependent or loved ones that they are taking care of. So this is something, what happens if I participate in a clinical trial and things go wrong? I'm already okay. So this is one of the things. Or if they are not on antivirals, then they have this perception that, okay, I'm not prescribed medication, I'm okay, why would I participate in a clinical trial? So this also, who should be on treatment and who's not, is a little bit hurting also clinical trial participation. So these are the two things we heard consistently, rather than actually like the mistrust in the research. This is actually a lot of people, like our research shows that a lot of people living with hepatitis B would be willing to participate in clinical trials if these concerns are thoroughly addressed in terms of what would happen to my health, my hepatitis B status, I'm not already on medication, and things like that.
Awesome, thank you. We have another question from Dr. Nettie Johnson. Are there any active clinical trials currently being conducted by the Hepatitis B Foundation? What are some of the eligibility requirements regarding other comorbidities?
That's an excellent question because that's an excellent point. And maybe I should have mentioned that as clinical trials, in order to be conducted, they have to be conducted in a medical institution with medical staff. There are certain regulatory even requirements for staff, whether medical staff or administrative staff who manage the clinical trial, certain certifications that they have to be fulfilled and achieved. Hepatitis B Foundation does not conduct clinical trials, but Hepatitis B Foundation works with clinical trial sponsors to promote some of the clinical trials. If the clinical trial sponsor is willing to work with the foundation, then we do promote the clinical trials for them to make it easier for people who are interested in finding and participating in clinical trials. There are several clinical trials happening right now. We're actually very excited because the pipeline for hepatitis B has never been busier. There are a lot of clinical trials, and hopefully there is one that is at the brink of being approved by, it's not news, the GSK drug is very close to the finish line, so everybody is very excited, but there are others that are in earlier phases that are in the pipeline.
Thank you. Last question. It's from one of our attendees. What happens if I have side effects?
Wonderful question. And that goes back to the point of make sure you have all the answers in advance. These are usually part of the consent form. So part of the consent form is to inform potential participants what are expected side effects and what should a person do when they face some of these side effects. But the very first thing is to make sure that you have an open channel, an easy communication channel with the investigation or the study team. So let's say a portal or a phone number that you can call and let them know right away that this is happening, and and even before participating, make sure that, okay, if that happens and I let you know, what is the next step, guys? Will you actually fly me to another place, or will I be able to see someone right away? And usually there are plans for this in place, but they are not properly communicated. So now, if that happens, and as a participant, I have all this information, I will call this number, talk to the nurse or to the physician, and get the right instructions and head to, let's say, if this needs immediate attention, then I'll head to the health facility that I should be heading to. But part of the responsibility of participants in a clinical trial is to really be on top of what's going on, following the regimen correctly, and also observing themselves very well so that they could communicate everything in a timely manner.
Thank you. We are at time. This has been a very informational session. As I said earlier, I will send the recording of the session with the slides and the resources to you in the next few weeks. Thank you so much, Yasmin, for being with us today and talking about clinical trials. I'm sure it's been helpful for people to know about it more as well. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We really hope we'll see you soon in one of our other webinars or Be Informed session. In the meantime, if you have any question about clinical trials or the foundation or Hep B United, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll be glad to sit down with you and chat about it. Thank you so much, and I hope everybody has a good day. Bye now.